minute.
Hello and welcome to our ongoing series, Financing the Future. This one concentrates on an important part of financing India's future, the MSME sector. The importance of the MSME sector has been known to policymakers for decades now. It is a key provider of employment and a big feeder to organized industry as well, to large-scale industry. The government more recently has started the Mudra scheme to give them to refinance loans given by other institutions. As well, the Reserve Bank has announced that loans that are standard as of January 2019 can be restructured once so that MSMEs who are in temporary problems are allowed to carry on business. How have these worked? What are the future steps that can be taken, and what are, in the first place, the problems encountered by the MSME sector? To answer these questions, we have with us two eminent people. I have with me the Executive Director of Bank of Baroda, Mr. Khichi, and Mr. Saurabh Tripathi, Managing Director and Senior Partner with BCG. Mr. Tripathi, Mr. Khichi, thank you very much for joining me. Well, Mr. Khichi, let me start with you. Credit itself is slowing down. It's standing at 8% bank credit growth year on year. And obviously to the MSME sector, it's slowed down a little more. At the outset, what are the problems you face? Is this a problem that they don't have security and therefore you can't give secured credit? Or is it that you don't have data?
In spite of the focus on credit growth of MSMEs that we would love to have, yes, there have been a little moderation in that. But I will not attribute it to the inadequate security. It is more about the data and the problems that MSME sector per se is facing, and that's not very new. Some of these problems have been continuing with the MSMEs for quite some time. And if I have to say, then any small disruption that happens in the economy, any change in preferences of the consumers, any product upgradation required, the first people that is to be hit is the MSME sector. But in my opinion, one of the most important aspect which hurts the credit growth in MSME sector is that most of the credit is available in the informal. Most of the MSMEs are in the informal sector. And bringing them to the formal sector requires a little bit of data. And if an MSME has to approach a formal credit sector, then definitely there will be requirement of certain things which he has to produce, and being in the informal sector, these are a little challenge. Even if you remember in Deepak Mohanty's recommendation in those MSME sector, they had put a sort of a proposition where credit counselor in terms like income tax counselor who could provide data to the formal sector on behalf of these MSMEs.
Fair enough. But that should have been somewhat solved by GST, no? Did not GST onboard more MSMEs into the tax net and therefore give you some data?
That's right. GST has been one of those solutions, but it's still too early to comment that whether entire problem would be solved by GST or not. It's still in the stages.
Fair problem. Fair point, sir. Let me just get Mr. Tripathi in on this. Mr. Tripathi, as Mr. Khichi says, this is already a vulnerable segment. And even small disruptions can be life and death for them. But lately, there has been a problem of credit flow, liquidity flow. Big corporations complain that government is not paying on time. MSMEs complain that both large corporations and government are not paying on time. Would you say that is the latest and a rather big disruption?
Yes, it is. It is indeed. We are obviously seeing a situation where the entire value chain, the flow of liquidity basically gets clogged, and as you go down the value chain and from the end consumer backwards, the impact becomes more and more severe. So people who are on the value chain behind the large corporates and so on and so forth, they really bear the brunt of it in a big way. But I would like to just add one point to Mr. Khichi's response there. I think over last 3-4 years, we have had huge amount of data getting accumulated, and India has become a very data rich economy. We obviously seeing a slowdown in credit, but slowdown in SME credit has been much more than the overall slowdown in credit. And we saw that because of the accumulation of bad debt, certain segments of the industry basically stopped lending to MSME altogether because it was not viable for them. And we are seeing a conundrum that we have got a lot of data at some place, GST is there. There are many other sources of data which have come. But I think our industry is learning how to electronically use the data, because it is not feasible anymore to have a lot of human intervention to make sense of all the data. And I think we are going through that very interesting phase, and I think it's in a matter of few years, we will come out in a very shining way as the industry tries to figure out how in a straight through manner we will process all the huge data that the rapidly digitizing India is putting in the hands of potential lenders.
Okay. Okay. Well, Mr. Tripathi, before I came to this discussion, I did speak with a few MSMEs to understand what is their problem. They are somewhat in the formal sector, let me tell you, Mr. Khichi. But Mr. Tripathi, what one of the MSMEs told me is that, I have a gala for security. So that's a small part of the credit. The rest of it is unsecured. And that is priced at, 20%, and that renders the project itself unviable. And this is the fundamental problem MSMEs face. Is that also, according to you, the problem, or has that been resolved by some people?
Well, unsecured credit would always come at a higher price. But as currently, if you look at the NPA rates in the MSME sector, for many financial institutions, they are like 15, 16%, even 20% for some players. So I think that risk is getting priced in. But as our lending practices improve, the quality of due diligence improves, I think we will be able to control the NPAs and the price will reflect it. So I think this is what is getting reflected. Obviously, high prices kill a lot of projects. But I sometimes feel that the businesses at the smaller end sometimes are able to sustain slightly higher prices than what large corporates are used to, because they are entrepreneurial, they don't price in the cost of the entrepreneur's time itself and all that, and so on and so forth. So it is viable to have slightly higher rates, not exorbitantly higher rates. But then I think we are just waiting for the credit process, the use of data in the economy, the availability of data through public sources, and the quality of integration of various IT systems that are required to make all of this to come together. And I think it's just a matter of time that it will happen. Many players are working on it, and we should see then that the rates at which the MSMEs are able to borrow would come down as the players see that they can contain the risk.
Mr. Khichi, the government has done its bit, government and RBI, to ensure credit flow. First, let's examine how well those are working. Is the Mudra refinancing an encouragement for you all to lend?
It is. It is. In fact, in the Mudra sector, we have been looking at it very intensely. And at the moment, we have around 11.5 lakh beneficiaries who have benefited out of it. Almost 11,500 crores is the outstanding in that Mudra. And this has been, refinancing has been...
How is the credit quality? The Reserve Bank Deputy Governor, no less, has raised the red flag and said that they are worried about NPA generation in this segment. See, it is 3 or 4 years old. The first tranche of principal repayment should have begun maybe a year back or something. Is this a problem that NPAs rise? Then immediately there will be distrust.
Well, I have gone through that report of Deputy Governor of RBI. He has shown his concern. The concern in a few cases are there, yes. But primarily, I will not agree fully with that, because MSME sector per se, whether it is Mudra or it is the other sector, we are all facing a little bit of challenges, a little bit of headwind in the economy, and that has its own challenges. So my Mudra, our Mudra delinquencies are not higher than the other MSMEs, which are about 10 lakhs.
Fair point.
So I think this is comparable.
So, yeah, okay. So would you say this one-time restructuring has helped? I mean, does it clean the slate for you, put them back on business? Is that a scheme that has worked?
I feel this so, because as RBI had said, on 1st of January 2019, all those accounts which showed any signs of stress but were not NPAs were eligible for restructuring. So we had a pretty big universe of almost 1 lakh plus accounts there. And over a period of time, forward backward movement also we have studied, and as of today our portfolio, that universe would be around 45,000 accounts which would be showing stress over this period of time. And we are restructuring them, and I am absolutely hopeful that this is going to be the game changer, at least for MSMEs, for all those viable MSMEs.
Okay, okay. Now the other point which I discussed with Mr. Tripathi, that payments generally down the line have slowed. I mean, large corporations tell us that we don't get bills paid by the government on time, and a small unit told me that we have digitized some records for the government, and neither the state government, and I think he was servicing Andhra Pradesh government, nor the central government have paid him. He's just a digitization unit. Do you think that this is a big source of bad loans?
For MSME sector per se, the problem is a little more accentuated because they as suppliers are embedded with a couple of large and their supply is, entire supply is, I mean entire production is put up to one corporate. So their sales are limited to one or two, and if there is a problem in that corporate, it percolates down. So MSME sector definitely is vulnerable to that. But having said that, there are certain provisions even in MSME Act 2007 where 45 days is mandated. Then all CPs were asked to clear all the dues within 45 days by October 19. Then we have TREADS platform where we are purchasing invoices and all for MSMEs. So we have a little ways, but yes.
That remains a problem.
That remains a little problem.
Okay, well, we are halfway through the show. We have to take a break. After this break, we are looking at other suggestions that have been made, the outreach program that banks had in the month of October, and other suggestions that they have to improve credit flow to the MSME sector. We are back in a jiffy. Welcome back to our special series, Financing the Future. We have been speaking about the problems of the MSME sector, a key link, a key cog in the wheel of the economy. I've been speaking with Mr. Khichi, the Executive Director of Bank of Baroda, and Mr. Saurabh Tripathi, Managing Director and Senior Partner BCG. Well, before going to the break, we discussed how Mudra is working and how the one-time dispensation given to standard MSME loans has been the right recipe. But Mr. Khichi, now let me come to the outreach. Was that a very big source of, looking at MSMEs? Were they attracted? Was the distrust factor somewhat dispelled?
We did the outreach program in two phases in the month of October. The first phase was in the early first week of October, and the second was in the 25th day. It was primarily a program where customers beyond even credit were looked at. Basically, this was
of
an
course,
interaction.
yeah. Retail.
It was not purely for MSMEs, it was agriculture, it was retail, and it was MSME also. And almost 2.53 lakh crores have been actually the credit flow from the PSUs, only the public sector banks which has gone in this outreach programs. And we also, as the Bank of Baroda, had almost 2.5 or 2.6 lakh customers whom we could interact, and credit of almost 32,000, 33,000 crores was disbursed in one single month of October.
Okay.
So it
fair
was.
Yeah, fair point that MSMEs were a small part. But I think the bigger part, which MSME guys also told me, and some of the NDF Cs I spoke to said, this co-origination and co-lending, according to them, is working. Of course, these are early days. Mr. Khichi, your thoughts. Is this something to be really encouraged, co-lending with microfinance and NDF Cs?
In my opinion, yes, a very big yes, because I think the future is co-origination, co-lending. More because it's a synergy between two organizations. We have that credit dispensation, we have the might of reach, but the type of selection, the collection processes and all, they microfinance institution, NBFCs, they expertise in that. And when both these come together, definitely it's a win-win situation for all three, including the customer. The future is co-origination, surely.
But Mr. Tripathi, you deal with a wide segment of the economy or number of segments of the economy. Where do you see the future? I mean, granularity and its capture in technology, machine learning, artificial intelligence is the way forward. Are you seeing some seminal improvement in data availability and therefore ease of dispensing credit?
Look at India's ranking in the ease of doing business surveys on ease of getting credit. We are out there. I think we are in top 10 or top 20 in the world, and our rating in the whole world on ease of getting credit is the best. Only maybe 1 or 2 areas is better than that. It is the best among all the dimensions, and that's because over last 5 to 7 years, the lending systems in India have dramatically improved. So far, that has manifested itself in the retail side. You can see economy is slowing down, but the retail portfolios of most of the banks, including public sector banks, are holding steady, and actually till last March, their NPA ratios actually improved. And that is all thanks to the phenomenal impact that data availability had through the credit bureaus. The problem with SMEs is that it is 10 times more complex to do SME lending with data. It is not as simple as checking somebody's bureau record and deciding. You have to take data from multiple different factors, multiple different sources, integrate them, create a straight-through process. It requires technology prowess, and it requires application of machine learning capabilities, which in India are not fully developed yet. But I can tell you with conviction that there are a lot of players who at this point of time are looking at this opportunity with a lot of ambition, and there is a lot of investment going to develop that capability. So in 3 years' time, the world will be very different.
Mr. Tripathi, have you come across NDF Cs who are partners in co-origination or recipients? Your view, because I got a lot of positive feedback for that idea.
Absolutely, there is no doubt about it. Our banking system has a problem in being able to reach at the last mile. NBFCs have been extremely vibrant sector of our economy, despite all the short-term problems that we have seen so far. Fundamentally, a large part of NBFC industry is quite robust, and the business model is quite clear, and we are also improving upon it. They have the last mile, they have the customer access, and there is a lot of entrepreneurial energy to create new business models, to manage risk better, and to reach the customers better. So with the new co-origination model, we are going to be able to get the best of both worlds. Now, what really needs to be done is our banking sector has to basically adapt to a new technology so that integration between NBFCs and banks can be very quick. It can be straight through, and then it could get a seamless experience to the customer.
Where do you see the roadblocks? What else would you want either from the government or from Mudra or from RBI in terms of minor tweaks or even big policy changes that can enlarge the flow of credit?
To the MSME sector per
MSMEs.
se, I may sound a little not in sync with the system, but yes, there were times when whenever we see an MSME in stress, we used to restructure it according to its viability and the cash flows which are supposed to be generated. But with the present set of guidelines, wherein if you restructure an account, it has to be downgraded to an NPA, and forget one-time restructuring window which has been opened. I think this could be an option where ongoing basis we could be allowed to restructure as long as there is enough viability, there is enough cash flows and enough stocks and activity which is found sustainable.
Would it help if you are allowed to that every time you restructured, you are asked to keep higher provisioning, but it is not named NPA? Is that a good via media?
We as such on restructured accounts, we are providing a higher provision already on that. Even in this one-time window which has been provided, also in these restructured accounts, we would be required to keep a higher provision. So that should not be a big issue.
So that should not hurt. Okay, all right. Mr. Tripathi, any suggestions?
No, I think there's a lot to be done. I think there is a lot to be done on strengthening the public infrastructure through which data is available for SMEs. I think we have talked a lot about GST, but I think when you start doing it, it is not yet really very smooth. Similarly, we have a lot of gap in registrations of SMEs. So private limited companies are registered, but what about partnerships, what about proprietorships? That's where the lenders trip. Similarly, we don't yet have a very robust way of categorization of SMEs so that comparison becomes easier. So what are the different businesses lines in which SMEs are? So all of that really needs to be done, and I think that is the mandate that public institutions should work on. I know Mudra scheme is good and restructuring proposals are good, but really what will create really robust lending in India is if government does its job in creating very robust public platforms which provide high quality data to all the players who are interested in it. And I think there is enough capital that is chasing financial services in India today that we will see very rapid innovation and very rapid entry of new players in this space who can partner with banks and lend to SMEs. So I am very bullish and very positive about it, but I think what is to be done in public domain is very clear as well.
Fair point, sir, and actually very eloquently put. There is so much of public data available. If the public registries are up and running, you have for an MSME unit the amount of electricity bills they have paid, the amount of telephone bills they have paid, all the bills that they've paid is in one place. You can easily get a credit score. But the two more important things which were said and not said very clearly, one, that government and public corporations, large corporations, must release their payments on time, and one way to do that is to make it mandatory to put them on treads, so that the government's deficit doesn't become the deficit or the problem of the MSME, or the large corporations' deficit doesn't become the deficit of the MSME. A second important point, of course, which is an obvious truth: if there is growth, then everyone has a place under the sun. The sooner we are able to kickstart from this 4% handle of GDP growth to a more ambitious 6% or a 7% handle of growth, I guess that will solve its own problems. Mr. Khichi and Mr. Tripathi, thank you very much for joining me in this conversation.
Focus, ideate, innovate, enable.